Here we are again. Another week in the gaming world has come and gone. More news is here for us to talk about, and I'm excited about it. But before we get to any of that, there's an elephant in the room that we need to discuss. Now, last week, Microsoft's job board revealed that Halo 343 Industries was looking for a producer for a project, and it specifically said it was looking for a producer for a project for a whole new Halo game or something along those terms. However, this was just boilerplate language, which is layman's terms for just standard industry language saying that they were looking for somebody to work on Halo Infinite. This was later confirmed, actually very shortly after I had uploaded my video. Therefore, today, I want to retract that, make sure we are up to date and we know what's going on, because what's the news if we don't know what's going on? Now, this week, I'm very excited because I have an interview in store for you about a brand new game called Foregone. I was very happy to have that discussion. We covered a whole bunch of great stuff. I'm going to talk about the future of Anthem because Bioware has its hands full with what is in store for the future. So what's going on with Anthem? Plus, I am going to dive into an HBO series all about The Last of Us. What? It's very exciting. I can't wait to talk about that. And then finally, we are going to finish things up talking about the releases and all of the major titles that came out last week. It's going to be a great weekly rewind. I am very excited about it. But without further ado, let's get into the 4 things that you need to know about that happened last week in the gaming world. Now let's have a conversation about Bioware, shall we? When we think about Bioware, we think about Mass Effect. We think about the brand new Dragon Age 4 that is coming up in the, well, distant future, but it's still coming up. We think about these major titles, and sometimes we forget that another big title released back in 2019 that Bioware really meant to be a cornerstone for their development company. And what I'm talking about is Anthem. Anthem was supposed to be the next Destiny. It was supposed to be the next heavy-hitting looter that just drove fans like crazy into that game to really play for hours and hours. However, that was not the case. In fact, when the game released in January 2019, it really hit a bunch of different roadblocks. The game world felt dry, the mechanics felt very lackluster, the storyline itself was just not there, and the game felt too much like a copy of Destiny and too little like its own imagining of its own world. Its own identity was just missing, and fans really saw this, fans really felt this, and because they felt this, the game really just hit too many roadblocks and it fell short. And so much so that Bioware actually shelved this project for a little bit until last year they really started pushing out more updates to the game. And they did this via the 2.0 reboot headed by Christian Daly. And it was a very driven reboot. Bioware had put their best foot forward and they were really trying to put everything into Anthem. And then late 2020 hit, and 2 major executives left Bioware. Now I'm talking about Casey Hudson and Mark Duras. And they left the company, and via a statement, Bioware said that this will not disrupt any unannounced upcoming plans. They said, don't worry, they are going to stay on track. However, the head of the 2.0 reboot of Anthem was moved over to Dragon Age 4 in Christian Daly. At this point, we have no idea who's in charge of the team that is working on Anthem, that is pushing out these updates. We have no idea. And more than that, as of this point, there's about 30 people working on Anthem. Most of these looters have hundreds of people working on them. I'm talking about Warframe, I'm talking about Destiny. These titles have hundreds of people pushing out updates, making sure the game runs smoothly, making sure that the player base is happy with the product they are getting. And in all reality, there's just not enough people working on this game at this point to really produce something that is truly special. And that is why this week, EA held a meeting to decide the fate of Anthem. Now, when I say this week, when you're seeing this, it's actually last week. However, they held this meeting focused on the internal revenue and the internal reception of the reboot, the 2.0 reboot that started last year. Because EA wanted to know, should we put everything into this moving forward, really push Anthem to the next level and try to get it up there with Warframe, with Destiny? Or should we let it die and move on to Dragon Age and Mass Effect? As I said, they lost their team leader in Christian Daly. They have a very small team. Even if they tripled this team, they would still be under 100 people. That's not enough to compete with Destiny. That's not enough to compete with Warframe. That's not enough to compete with any looter. And honestly, when was the last time that anybody really had a serious discussion about Anthem? Talking about it being one of the better video games out there. Talking about it having one of the more major fan bases out there. Simply put, this game could never catch up with these other titles. Now, Battlefront 2 did regain its footing, did build a fan base behind it when it did its own reboot. However, that took years. And it had the benefit of being Star Wars, which holds its own certain pedestal that fans will flock to at some point. Even if EA does decide to move forward with this project, even if EA decides to push everything into it, triple the resources, triple the team, it's still not going to be enough. This game is not going to ever push to the level that they want it to be at. So, whether this game gets rebooted again for 3.0 reboot in 2021, whether it does get more funding, or whether it gets shut down, at this point, I think we could safely say that the nail is in the coffin for Anthem. It's time to move on. And that is number 4. Now we head to HBO, the place where magic happens. Or is that Disney World? The point is, The Last of Us is headed to HBO. It's getting the Game of Thrones treatment. And I'm not talking about large-scale dragons and dinners of... I never watched the show, so I can't do any major quotes about it. But the point is, it's getting 2 major actors from that series. And not only that, it's really going to be an embellishment of just how great these games were. Now, for those of us who aren't aware, it's from the Last of Us series, the survival horror zombie-esque series that originally released way back in 2013 with a sequel arriving last year. The series had major positive reviews, it made a ton of money, it was a revenue success, and it just is no surprise that it is going to be finally made into an HBO series. Who is going to be in this series though? Now, as I said, 2 actors from the Game of Thrones. The first one being Pedro Pascal. This guy is getting everything. First, he was in Narcos. Well, not first, but he was in Narcos. He was in Game of Thrones. He was in Mandalorian. And now he's heading to The Last of Us. Now, he is obviously going to be playing Joel. Now, reports say that The Last of Us HBO series will be his lead priority moving forward, which is bad news for any of us who are really looking forward to Mandalorian Season 3, because it looks like it might be taking a little bit of a back burner because of this. We will see it eventually, I'm sure, but this isn't about that. This is about The Last of Us, and it is very exciting that they are pushing ahead full steam with this. However, who is going to be playing Ellie? Now, Bella Ramsey. She is going to be taking the reins. As any of you hardcore Game of Thrones fans know, she was a major component of that series and a very talented actress. It's going to be very exciting to see her play this role. However, what about the people who created these characters for us in the video game world? What about Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, the people who voiced and did all the motion capturing for the game itself? There is no word right now whether they are going to be part of this. However, I would expect them to have some sort of nod in this series, some sort of recognition, and I'm sure that HBO will make this happen. When is it happening? There's no word right now on an official release date. However, casting is currently underway and filming is set to begin this year. Again, we don't have a set date. However, I would expect it to begin sometime in the summer of this year, which would lead us to believe that this series is going to release sometime in 2022. So it's right around the corner, and it's very exciting to see that. Barring any major delays, be they COVID or something else, this could be on our TV screens next year. And for any of us who really love The Last of Us, who really enjoyed that game franchise and wanted to see more, it's going to be really interesting to see what HBO has in store for us with this brand new series, The Last of Us. Until we get more information though, until we get a teaser trailer or some set photos or something, we must move on to number 2. Last week at the Steam Game Festival, I had the opportunity to play a certain demo, Foregone. Now, Foregone, for those of us who don't know, is a 2D action platformer / shooter. It's a beautifully rendered game, very incredible story to it, very intriguing gameplay, and something that I would definitely recommend everyone who has a chance play. However, recently I had the chance to sit down with one of the game designers behind the title and talk about a lot of the different things that went into it and a lot of the different things behind it. It was a great conversation. We covered a lot of very intriguing things. So without further ado, it's time to get into that interview.
Foregone has players take control of a super soldier, which we refer to as arbiters in the world. She's been sent to investigate a city that's been infected by a corruption called the Harrow. When you're there, you kind of quickly realize that some monstrous enemies have been revived by this corruption. The investigation you've been sent on doesn't quite go as planned, and then it's kind of up to you to unravel the story from there. So when we learned that we were working on a platformer, it was almost kind of a no-brainer to go for the pixelated art style. For me personally, I think it was Mega Man X had a huge inspiration on me growing up. And there's some remnants of that in this game. You do get an air dash at some point, and that's very similar to Mega Man X2. There's a wall climb that similarly feels to the Mega Man X wall climb. Not quite, but it's so we try to give you plenty of options when it came to upgrading your character. Every piece of equipment that drops has a set of randomized modifiers. And then in addition to that, we have 2 skill tree systems. One is kind of strictly for strong passive effects, and these will just be things that affect you as you play the game. And then the second part of that is a kind of a skill tree built into the skills themselves. So each of them has a branching path that you can focus into, and then we're hoping that kind of combining all 3 of these things will lead to a large variety of playstyles. So our game is divided into basically 4 different visual environments, and within those 4 environments you have, not counting the tutorial stuff, it's about 12 levels containing about 10 boss fights total. We are actually out on the Epic Game Store, Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. The Steam launch is March 1st, and that will come with a DLC update pushed to kind of all the platforms.
Now, if you enjoyed that conversation, the free demo for this game is actually available over on Steam, as well as the main website, which I linked below. The full interview is going to be linked over on my channel. That link is also below. It was a very great conversation. We covered a whole bunch of different things. As I said, definitely worth checking out. However, that is all about the indie devs. That is number 2. Let's move on to the releases. Now we head to the releases that happened last week. There was 2 big ones, but outside of that, it was pretty quiet on the release front. Now, the first one I'm going to be talking about is Little Nightmares 2. It released on February 11th from Tarsier Studios, and it released to all platforms. So you ain't got to worry about exclusive stuff, because that's not what Little Nightmares 2 is doing. That's not what they're about. Now, for those of us who don't know, it's the sequel to the acclaimed 2017 Little Nightmares that really took fans by the score. They loved this game. They couldn't get enough of it. And for those of you who are like, well, what's it all about? I'm gonna tell you. It is a horror puzzle platformer with an emphasis on a very dark setting. Very dark setting. And its sequel really puts a highlight on team-oriented gameplay. And it is very exciting to see this change. The game released to pretty much all positive reviews. Everybody really loved this game, and I definitely recommend that you get your hands on it because it's worth a look. Outside of that, the other game that we're going to talk about is actually an expansion, a Wii U port, would you rather. It is going to be the expansion of Super Mario's 3D World. I'm talking about Bowser's Fury. Yes, Bowser's Fury. And it looks like it's going to be a blast to play. Now, what's Bowser's Fury all about? In this cat-themed expansion of Super Mario's 3D World, Mario and Bowser Jr. team up and head to Lake Lapcat, where Bowser has gone berserk. just how berserk is he gone? You gotta play the expansion to find out, and I definitely recommend you do. It's a great game. The expansion looks fun. It looks enjoyable. Last week, the game sold actually more copies in the UK than any other game, including Little Nightmares 2. It released to acclaimed success. Fans loved this. They couldn't get enough of it, and it actually sold more copies than any other Mario Switch port to date, and it's only week 1. That's impressive. I mean, you can't get around it. This is very, very impressive. But those are the 2 major releases that happened last week. Not too many titles hitting the market as opposed to the last couple weeks where it was just release upon release upon release. So really kind of take the time, play both of these games because they're definitely worth it. But besides that, that is all I have for you. That is the Weekly Rewind. That is all of the news from last week, plus a little tidbit from the week before when we talked about Halo. If you have anything that I missed, if you have anything that you want to talk about, if you have anything on your mind that you just want to tell me, let me know in the comments below. And I will see y'all next week on the Weekly Rewind. Take it easy.